All right, today we are jumping right into a really powerful passage from the book of Isaiah, chapter 5. We're going to do a verse-by-verse deep dive into the prophet's indictment of Judah's leadership. We'll break down exactly what they were doing wrong and the severe judgments that Isaiah says are coming because of it. Let's get into it.
So here's our game plan. First up, we've got to figure out what Isaiah even means when he says, woe. Then we'll dig into the two major sins he calls out, greed and hedonism. After that, we'll see exactly how those actions lead straight to a devastating judgment. And we'll finish up by looking at the aftermath Isaiah describes.
Okay, so before we really get into the nitty-gritty of the verses, there's this one word we have to get our heads around: woe. When a prophet like Isaiah uses this word, it's not just him saying, "Oh, that's too bad." No, this is a formal, almost legal declaration. It's basically an announcement that judgment is coming. The verdict's in, and the sentence is about to be read. So, Isaiah kicks things off in verse 8, and he is not holding back. His first woe is a direct shot at economic injustice. He's pointing his finger right at the wealthy elite who are gobbling up land and pushing everybody else out.
Now, you might think this is just a critique of being rich, but it's so much deeper than that. Isaiah is highlighting a direct violation of a foundational law in ancient Israel. The wealthy were just buying up everything, creating these huge private estates until, like the verse says, they were placed alone in the midst of the earth. They were isolating themselves in their own wealth.
And to really grasp just how serious this was, you have to understand the law of inheritance that Moses established. Land wasn't just property, it was a sacred inheritance from God, and it was meant to stay in a family for generations. There was even a whole system, the Jubilee, designed to return land to its original owners. So by buying up field after field, the rich weren't just playing Monopoly. They were tearing apart the social safety net and creating a class of landless, poor people, which was totally against the law.
And believe it or not, this isn't just some ancient problem that doesn't apply anymore. There's this really striking parallel from the early days of the Mormon Church in Kirtland, Ohio. Members got caught up in land speculation, buying up plots and flipping them for inflated prices. Joseph Smith warned them against it, but they kept going, until a national land price collapse in 1839 wiped them out. It's a modern echo of the exact same greed Isaiah was talking about thousands of years earlier.
So, what's the consequence for all this greed? Well, Isaiah lays it out, and it's a perfect, almost poetic justice. In verse 9, he declares that the very homes they coveted, these great and fair houses they built by pushing others out, they're going to be desolate, empty. The real estate empire they built is destined to become a ghost town.
But the judgment doesn't stop with empty houses. It gets worse. Verse 10 says the land itself will turn on them. Now, the measurements here, a bath, a homer, an ephah, are ancient, so we kind of have to translate them to really feel the impact of what he's saying.
So get this, a normal 10-acre vineyard back then, it would give you about 500 baths of wine. A bath is around 7.5 gallons, so a lot. But Isaiah prophesies that the same 10 acres will produce only one bath. That's not just a bad year, that's a total collapse, a productivity drop of more than 99%.
And it's the exact same story with their grain. They'd plant a homer of seed, but the prophecy says the entire harvest would only be an ephah, which is just a tenth of what they planted. That's a 90% loss. You're getting back only a tiny fraction of what you put in. The land itself is basically giving up on them.
Okay, so Isaiah has just hammered them for their greed. Now in the next verses, he pivots. He goes after what they do with all that wealth and free time. He issues a second woe, this time aimed at their non-stop party lifestyle and the fact that they're completely blind to what's really going on.
I mean, Isaiah paints an incredible picture here. You can almost see it. The rich and powerful are just absorbed in these all-day, all-night parties. They start drinking early in the morning and keep going. Their lives are filled with music, wine, and endless feasts. But right in the middle of all this celebration, they are totally oblivious. They regard not the work of the Lord. They don't see God's hand in anything, and they sure aren't thinking about the consequences of their actions.
It's the classic fiddling while Rome burns scenario, isn't it? They are so consumed with their own pleasure that they are completely, willfully ignorant of the disaster that their prophet is desperately trying to warn them about. They just don't consider what's happening.
And all of this willful blindness, it leads directly to the tipping point of the whole passage. Isaiah has laid out the crimes in verses 8 through 12. Now, starting in verse 13, he declares the verdict, connecting the dots between their behavior and their fate. And it all hinges on one single word: therefore. This isn't just a transition, it's the sound of the hammer falling. Because of the greed, Because of the nonstop partying, because of the deliberate ignorance, therefore, this is what happens next.
And listen to the language Isaiah uses here in verse 13. He doesn't say my people will go into captivity. He says they are gone into captivity. It's past tense. The judgment is so certain, so locked in, that he talks about it like it's already happened. Their so-called honorable men, the same ones who were feasting, will be starving, and everyone else will be dying of thirst.
So the next few verses basically read like a judge's sentence being read out. First, captivity. The people will be carried off to Babylon. Second, humiliation. The rich and powerful will be brought low by hunger and thirst. Isaiah even uses this incredible metaphor of the grave, or hell, opening its mouth wide to swallow up all their parties and their pride. And through all this, God's holiness and justice will be put on full display.
So, okay, judgment falls. The people are exiled. What's left? What happens to all that land they were fighting over? That's what the final verse we're looking at is all about. Verse 17 paints a really stark picture of what comes next.
Verse 17 gives us this really interesting image. Then shall the lambs feed after their manner, and the waste places of the fat ones shall strangers eat. Now, scholars have a couple of different ideas about who exactly is benefiting from all this desolation. So there are basically two ways to look at this. The first idea is that the lambs and strangers are foreign invaders, like the Babylonians, who just come in and let their flocks graze in what used to be the private parks of the rich. But there's another take. What if the lambs are actually the humble, righteous poor of Judah, the ones who are left behind? In that reading, they are the ones who get to inherit the waste places, the empty, desolate mansions of the rich who were carried off. Either way, the end result is the same. The land that the oppressors hoarded is reclaimed.
And that really brings us full circle, doesn't it? Isaiah's message is just this stark lesson in cause and effect. Greed leads to desolation. Ignoring reality leads to destruction. The judgment he describes isn't some random bolt from the blue. It's the direct, natural outcome of their actions. And that leaves us with a pretty timeless question. If our actions have such direct, predictable consequences, why is it that we, just like the elites of ancient Judah, so often fail to stop and consider the work of our own hands?